Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Mental, a podcast that seeks to educate, empower, and uplift those seeking guidance through the monumental world of mental health. I'm your host, Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health clinician. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and I hope you enjoy it. So, everyone, welcome to Mind Your Mental. On this episode, we have an awesome guest. So, I always talk about how I love hearing about individual experiences when it comes to mental health, of course, because I'm a psychologist. So, I just like to hear people talk. But today we have Saidah Murphy, who is going to talk to us about her experience with mental health. So I don't want to boost her up too much. I'll let her introduce herself too, but just to give a little background. So she's the CEO of SM Media Enterprise, which is a film, television, and podcast production company. Like, film wasn't enough, television wasn't enough. Let's just add podcast to that too. So that's amazing. And it's based in San Diego, California. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about yourself.
I have my production company. I'm currently based in San Diego. I'm originally from Detroit. I'm a single mom. I work a 9 to 5 and do my business on the side. So I'm always busy. That's me in a nutshell.
That's you in a nutshell.
That's me in a nutshell. I think if I put out those titles, entrepreneur, single mom, full-time employee, people can understand how crazy my life is.
Yeah, busy all the time, which makes me so happy that you agreed to come on the show today. So one of the questions I want to ask was kind of like, what has been your experience with like mental health care, mental well-being? Like, how about we start off there?
Okay, so I have had, I don't want to say issues, but I have had my experiences with mental health disorders since before I can remember. But, I grew up in the 90s, so it wasn't really talked about in the 90s. It was, if you had any type of mental health issue, it was called anger management. You needed anger management. So as a kid, I went to a few different therapists for anger management, but it never really stuck. It was never really effective. So I kind of dropped it. And once I got into college and got towards my adult years, I saw a psychiatrist. I got officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder and anxiety disorder. So I can actually start taking some steps to actually taking care of myself. So I was against therapy because I had such a bad experience as a child. But once I moved to San Diego, I was like, I have to find me a therapist because it's essential, because I'm out here with my daughter by myself. There's no family members I can just go sit down and talk with. I need to have someone to support me out here. So I found a therapist and I've been going to therapy, and everything, I won't say everything is okay because I still have my ups and downs, but I'm kind of leading in the path of getting everything under control.
Yeah, and it sounds like you started off with what so many like Black people and minorities start off with is being misdiagnosed, right? Like saying that it started off with your diagnosis being anger management, which is, oh my God, like when I tell you, one of the things I always say is that, in children, anxiety, depression, stress, trauma, it manifests as anger. Like there's no way for you to say, I am experiencing a depressive episode right now. So it just manifests as anger. And if people do not have that cultural competence, if clinicians do not have the wherewithal to know that, oh, your child's angry.
Oh yeah,
like what?
Absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
So, and I'm so glad you decided to still seek mental healthcare, because so many people don't, right? They had a bad experience and they're like, oh, I'm cool on that. But you kind of just realize that, okay, I still need to, I have someone to take care of, including myself. I take care of someone else. So I really need to get involved with that.
Yeah.
Do you remember more what it was like when you got told like, oh, it's anger management, or like what kind of stuff they were trying to work with you on? Like, it seems like it clearly didn't fit because that wasn't the right diagnosis in the first place.
Yeah. They never really said like, oh, you have an anger problem, so this is your diagnosis. You're just angry all the time. It's like, okay, we're going to take you to therapy for anger management. There's no diagnosis. It's just, let's sit down and talk and try and get to the bottom of why you're so angry. But I don't know. When I was growing up, there was no real diagnoses out there. I know that they exist because I studied some psychology in college. So I know that they were out there, but they were never really talked about. Depression wasn't a thing. Anxiety wasn't a thing. So it was always just, you're angry. Let's talk through it and find out what you're mad about. Which I'm like, now that I think about it, I'm like, that makes no sense whatsoever because, like you said, it manifests as anger, but anger is not a mental disorder. It's just a side
No.
effect of it.
Yes. Oh, I might have to make that the title. Yes, anger is not anger is not a mental health disorder. It's a side effect of so many things. Do you remember like what specifically were they stating that like as like examples of like this is angry behavior? Like what else could this be but anger in a
Well,
child?
my episodes when I was a child, I now that I'm like working through it in therapy, I would get extremely anxious about things and I would feel really misunderstood. So I would lash out. I would smash things. I would yell. I would throw a fit. And the fit part is what was seen that needed to be worked on, not what led up to the fit. So I've blocked out so much of my childhood therapy because it was just such a horrible experience. So
Yeah, it wasn't helpful.
I don't even remember if we actually worked through some stuff like, oh, this is what you were upset about. This is probably what led up to it. I have no idea. I like vaguely remember those sessions, but I just don't remember it being a conversation.
Yeah, and you know what? One of the main reasons why I like working with children is because I think they're often overlooked when it comes to the aspect of having a conversation. Like children and adolescents, um, anger is just like the top of the iceberg. I always try to get to the root of it, but I really like try to make it an environment where they talk, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm not giving you a million assessments. Like we're just gonna come in here, we're gonna talk. I'm gonna try to get to the root of things. Like I don't like say you have a first session. I'm not giving you recommendations and things to do in the first session. I
Right.
don't even know you. And then
Exactly.
you don't even know me, so you're not even comfortable with talking to me about what's really going on.
Exactly.
Like that's not even the thing. Like sometimes you bring children in, like they're having outbursts, they need to have some strategies. And I'm like, well, first of all, hello. Um,
Right.
like,
Hi, how are you? What's
hi,
your
how
name?
are you doing? So that's not, I'm like, that's not my zhuzh. That's not what I do. I actually like to get to know people before I start telling them what to do with their lives.
Exactly.
Call me picky. I just think that's the way it should be. Um, and sometimes parents don't even think about like not even think about, but I don't even think it's a lack of thinking. I think it's so hard for parents. They're doing so much that it is difficult to really take the time and like, okay, I'm going to take hours of time to have conversations with my child about certain things to see how things are manifesting. I don't know anyone who has time for that. Like, you know, just to be like, okay, I know I have to work like 40, 50 hours on a good week. Then I come home, be a parent. So I'm working 40, 50 more hours. I'm trying to do all this and do it by myself. Sometimes things get forgotten, especially if your child isn't like pushing for extra stuff. Sometimes it gets forgotten to be like, man, I checked in and we had like a good conversation, but then like it's been a couple of days and I feel like I need to check in again, but I gotta do this bill and then now she's asleep or he's asleep. Like it's so hard that I feel like the pressures that are on parents, oh my God, especially single parents, are kind of what makes it so hard to check in with their kids sometimes because there's just not a space for it.
Yeah.
Um,
And then it's
you're working
also
so
easy
hard.
to forget too. Like, my daughter is 6 now, and she has her moments where she lashes out. And for me, as a parent, I'm instantly like, no, nip it in the bud. That's not how we behave. And I often forget that she might be having her own little anxiety or her own issues. So I have to remember and remind myself to check in with her because she's a human just like me. She has her issues just like me. And yes, some behaviors need to be corrected because that's your job as a parent, but you also have to be able to step away from parenting and say, okay, what is this human being feeling and why are they feeling this way?
Yes, yes. What are they feeling and why are they feeling this way? Because, you know, you're with your children and then they're at school. So they're at school for a good chunk of time. You don't, I mean, unless something big happens where so and so took their juice box or something like that, like most of the time, you don't know exactly what's happened unless there's an issue. And some children just keep stuff in. They're just like, I'm not going to say anything. And then they lash out. And I'm like, well, this person's been bothering you for weeks.
And then it doesn't even have to be something like that. Like, it can be super simple things. Like, my daughter just stepped in before I hopped on the interview, and she's like, "Am I still number one?" And I'm like, "Girl, what are you talking about? You are an only child. Of course you're number one." Well, she's like, because we just got a cat. So she's like,
Okay.
"The cat gets all the attention and I feel left out." I'm like, "Girl, it's a cat. The cat's not going to replace you." But I also have to think like a 6-year-old, like, oh, we see that mommy now has to feed the cat, pet the cat. The cat is always wanting attention. Maybe I'm not getting as much attention as I used to before the cat got here. So
Mhm.
I just have to remember that she's a human and she's processing things that are going on in her world a certain way, and that might manifest as anxiety about not being number one, and then she might start to lash out about that. So I have to be able to notice the little nuances in order to help address that behavior.
Yeah, I totally get that. So, how has your experience been? Like, have you had you made a really good statement and a really good point earlier about like I'm not going to say everything's fine because I'm still working on it,
Mm-hmm.
which really speaks to the process of therapy and like achieving certain aspect of mental well-being because it is a process, right? Like it's most things in life, it's a journey. There really is no destination when it comes to it. But do you feel like your beginning with this journey was a bit more difficult than the ending, or how do you feel like your process just from like in the beginning of mental health and seeking mental health care when you receive your diagnosis is different than what you're processing right now?
I never tell people that, oh, I'm better or I'm getting cured or my disorders are going away or they're like smaller, because that's not true. Like, I will have super good days where I'm like, fine, I'm on it, I'm productive. And then at a flip of a dime, I'm back in a depressive episode or I'm having an anxiety attack. Because what people don't understand about mental disorders are that they don't go away. You can manage them and you can notice your triggers and try and control those things, but they do not go away and they don't become smaller. You just learn how to adjust yourself to deal with them. So I never say I'm getting better. I say I'm learning how to manage better, because it's just something that I have to live with. And I think if people accept that this is a part of me, just like the color of my skin, the color of my eyes, this is me, and I know how to navigate this world with this disorder, then I think they'll be more comfortable to say, okay, I know how to manage it. I'm getting a little better at being out in the world with it. It's with me, but I know how to kind of control it and navigate it.
Yeah, do you feel like you automatically like got on that train and you understood that, or do you feel like that was something that took time, and if so, how did you get to this place where you understand that this is as much a part of me as my skin?
Well, it's actually ironic because I didn't get to this understanding when I was in a good place. I got to this understanding when I was in, I don't want to say I was in a depressive episode, but I was having some issues with my mental health and everything. And I just realized that this is not going to go away. And it would irritate me when people were saying, well, oh, if you just go to therapy, you can get cured. Or where people who have, I like to call people who have actual diagnoses, they're like chronic. And then there are also people who experience a trauma and they have situational mental disorders.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of people who have situational mental disorders who like go through a trauma, they go through therapy, and then they're better and they're on with their lives. And they're like, well, I just went to therapy for a while and now I'm cured. And that would irritate the heck out of me, because I'm like, this for me is not going to get cured, because I've been with it since day one and it's going to be here until the day I decide to leave the earth. So it wasn't where I was in a good place where I came to this, but I just realized that this is just a part of me. It's just like anybody else who has a chronic disorder, like a diabetes or asthma. It's just something you learn to live with.
Yeah, it sounds like you've made like a lot of growth with this process. It also sounds like you had to work through some invalidating statements when it comes to your your
Oh,
like mental health.
yes. Oh, yeah.
And I actually want to talk more about that because I think that's something that kind of deters people from seeking mental health or kind of makes them feel more alone in a sense because you feel like you're not being understood or you're being gaslighted, things like
Mhm.
that. When you were experiencing, so what would you say are some of these statements that you were just like, this is not helpful, like this, I like whether it was intended to be helpful or not, this does not help me deal with what I am trying to deal with, like what would you say examples of that was for you.
A lot of people, because I'm very open about my mental health issues. Like I post about it on my Facebook page and Instagram and everything because I want people to know that this is normal and that everyone can go through this and has the ability to deal with it. So I would post a status and say, oh, I'm depressed or I'm having an anxiety disorder. And the one thing that really was not helpful is the people say, oh, well, just pray about it or just meditate, just center yourself. And those things are not helpful. Yes, meditation helps. Yes, prayer helps, but you cannot pray this away. Even if you're in the throes of it, you might forget to sit down and meditate or pray or however you try and center yourself. You forget to do that because you're in the throes of dealing with your symptoms. So that statement right there just infuriates me because I'm like, that's not helpful. Check in with me, make sure that I'm okay, ask me what I need. Like, I tell my boyfriend all the time because he's learning how to deal with me with my mental disorders and he always wants to help, which is great. And I just say, just ask me about it. Just ask me to explain what goes through my mind when I'm going through a depressive episode or when I'm having an anxiety attack. Because while I'm not in it, I can clearly explain it to you and tell you how to help deal with it. But if you just try to guess and say, well, the internet told me to tell you to pray or you need to do this and you need to like take a walk, that's not helpful because everyone deals with it differently.
You're right. And everyone's symptoms manifest differently too. Do you think one of the issues that individuals like they're trying to be helpful, but I think there's also a lack of education in our community when it comes to the difference between mental health disorders and stressors,
Right.
to a certain extent. And then you're struggling with you're like managing honestly well, like
Yeah.
balancing
This is
just from like
surprising. I'm going to say it's a surprise that I'm going through this interview so well today because and I'm going to be completely transparent here. I literally just had a panic attack yesterday. So I was on the verge of canceling this interview because I had the panic attack and I just wanted to be in bed. So I'm surprised at myself that I'm out here just like, okay, let me just talk and
thriving.
everything. I'm
Yeah,
thriving.
talking
So
about it, and I really appreciate it. Well, so that's something also to talk about. So, what are panic attacks like for you?
For me, it depends. It manifests differently. It depends on how it's triggered. So, yesterday's panic attack was triggered by some ants in my house, and I got extremely breathy, like I couldn't catch my breath, and I just had the urge to clean my entire house. And it was not like a let me just peacefully clean, it was like a manic clean because there were ants in my house and I don't do bugs. So I will have a panic attack like that, or there might be a panic attack where I completely shut down and black out because it's just too overwhelming what's going on. So I just completely shut down, close my eyes, and don't remember anything after the panic attack. So it manifests differently depending on what the triggers are.
So, if you could have like a session where you explain to people, because I think one of the issues that so many people don't understand the difference between mental health disorders, personality disorders, and stressors, how would you explain to them the disorders that you are currently managing? Like, how would you, if you had to break down each one
Okay.
and how it manifests in you, how would you say, like, this manifests in me this way, this manifests in me this way, this is not just me being stressed out and needing to breathe,
Right.
this is something totally different?
Yeah, exactly. So I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And bipolar 2 is when you have more depressive episodes than manic episodes, but you can have manic episodes as well. So for me, that comes and goes at any point in time. I can be having a good week and then all of a sudden I'm depressed for 3 or 4 days, or I'm depressed for 2 or 3 weeks. It comes and goes. But with that also comes the manic episodes, which I think are ensued by like my anxiety and everything. I'm a very particular person. Things have to be in a specific order. Things have to be clean. I get anxiety when I drive cars because I've been in a couple of car accidents. So I get anxiety when I drive. So those type of things are stressors for me. And if those stressors come suddenly or there's something that I can't control, then that heightens the anxiety. And if I cannot get control of the anxiety, it turns into a panic attack.
Okay. So you're and just for individuals who don't understand, like the difference between there's such significant, it's like a complete 180.
Hmm.
With manic episodes versus depressive episodes. Like with manic episodes, you can have a lot of energy, increase activity levels, and have trouble sleeping. And this may sound like, oh, this sounds great, but it's also like you can't turn it off.
No.
Okay, so it's not like it's not like anyone wants to be like super uber productive and can't turn off their brain and can't sleep and stuff like that. Like you can't turn it off. You
No.
don't know how long it's going to last. And then on the other side of that, then you have your depressive episodes, and these can be really down episodes. You're feeling sad, down, empty, little energy, decreased activity.
Exactly.
You can have trouble sleeping, or you can sleep too much. You feel like you can't enjoy anything.
Hmm.
And depending on the gaps between your episodes with mania versus depressive, these can be like back to back. Like imagine just it's a whirlwind.
It is.
Like you
It is.
can't you don't know when it's going to come sometimes. Like luckily a lot of individuals like manage it through medication or depression, no,
Mhm.
not depression, medication or therapy. But if they don't, and this is something that is consistently happening to you, this is enough to just drive you up the
It
wall. It's like,
would
what am
drive
I
you
going to
up
get
the
today?
wall because I've had
Who
a
am I going to get
few
today?
manic episodes that have spewed into depressive episodes. So I would go like days on a manic high and I would be super productive, and it's not even good productive. So there's a difference between like being good productive and really getting stuff done, and then just being productive and just doing everything because you have the energy to, because
Yeah.
you end up looking back and say I really didn't get anything accomplished because I was just doing stuff. So I've had manic episodes that have turned into depressive episodes like on the flip of a dime, like they have caused the depressive episode. So it's exhausting.
Yes, I think that's the way I always when I have dealt with patients with that, I'm like, you were exhausted. Like in the way you mentioned it, like you can, it's like, it's one thing to be productive and I'm getting these papers done and doing all this stuff, but it's another thing for me to say, oh, there's this and I'm going to work on this. Oh, so you're
Mhm.
doing a million things. None of them are getting done 100% of the way. And then when you're done and you come down, you're like, I did nothing.
Nothing,
Like I have been
absolutely
up all
nothing.
day. I have been working on stuff all day, and yet nothing got completed fully.
I will look at my work and say I've started 10 projects and have not completed one. So
Yes.
I have multiple projects that I am currently working on that are not completed because it's like, oh, I got a wild idea here. Let me start on this. Oh, something else triggered. Then let me research that. Let me start this project. Oh, I have this great idea here. And nothing is done. So it's frustrating. It's not only exhausting, but it's frustrating because you know that you want to be productive. You know, especially if you are working in the field that you want to work in or you have talent, you know that you can be successful, but this hinders it because you don't ever get anything to completion. So you're frustrated on top of that, and the frustration causes stress, and then the stress causes another manic episode, and then you're right back to a depressive episode, and it's just a whole cycle that never, ever, ever stops.
Yes, it sounds like like a vicious cycle, and it's interesting. You tie in perfectly how your environment and like it triggers what happens to you,
Hmm.
right? Like it's like you already have difficulties. You manage like your anxiety, but then your anxiety can trigger something else, which may and then you have to manage that. And then this isn't happening in a bubble. You still have to integrate with the entire
Yes.
world. You still have to be a parent and a person, and you still have to work, and you still have to
Yes.
pay bills. And it's
Hmm.
not like you get to just be like, okay, I'm going to have these episodes. Everyone's going to understand because I have no responsibilities, and then I'm
Right.
just going to come back and it's going to be okay. Like, no.
And it's so
You
difficult, especially for those of us who work 9 to 5s. Mental health days are not the norm. There are some companies who are really good with giving their employees mental health days, but they're not the norm. And a lot of people stigmatize mental health disorders, so you don't really want to tell people about it. So I've had plenty of days where I have been in a depressive episode or my anxiety has been too high for me to leave the house, and I would just call in sick. And I would say, oh, I'm catching a cold or I have food poisoning, because I'm not going to tell my employer that I have an anxiety disorder. I need a mental health day. I need to just stay in my bed all day, because that doesn't sound productive. They're going to be like, what am I paying you for then?
Yeah, and honestly, just like on the legality of things, everyone out there, you don't need to tell people why you are calling out. If I have sick days, it's a sick day. If
Hmm.
I have PTO, it's a PTO day. And you know what? Even though it's also like mad illegal to ask people why they're requesting out, people still do it. Like offices still do that, and it's incredibly illegal to
Yeah.
ask like to ask that in the first place. And then in the moment you may not know that, but you also feel like I have to explain myself or I'm going to lose my job.
And
Like there's a
that's how
pressure.
I feel on my end. Like my employer never really asked if I need, like, why I need to take the day off, but a part of my anxiety is like, okay, I need to tell them something because they're not going to start questioning this and they're going to start having conversations when I'm not in the office about replacing me. It's a whole cycle, and those thoughts are not rational. That's what comes with the anxiety, and that's what ensues like the depressive disorders, because you have tons of irrational thoughts like, oh, the world is going to end if I call in sick, when it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And like with my field, luckily they are clearly a lot better with being accepting of mental health days. Because I wish you would tell me I can't have a mental health day as a psychologist. I'm like, have you lost your
Yeah,
mind?
you guys
Are you
need
serious?
it for
Yeah,
sure.
so they are, but I've noticed that so many professions aren't. And also when parents are bringing their children to see us for therapy, so many parents like they struggle to be able to take their children to appointments. People are asking like, why are you requesting out again?
Mhm.
Can't somebody else take your child? And it's just like, first of all, my child is my life. Okay, so
And
if I
don't
need to
let
take my child to an appointment, I have to take my child to an appointment. I've had families have to do FMLA for it. Like it's just to make sure their job is secured,
Mhm.
just to make sure they don't lose their job over this. And it's just the outside forces like they make it more difficult. What do you think would be a sound solution? What do you think could help individuals who are dealing with these things, like stuff that employees or employers should know to be more supportive in this environment? Like if you could fix it, what would you say? Like, okay, this is the new protocol.
I
Like if
think,
you had with your company, say
yeah,
you hire like 50 new people, what would your protocol be?
I think training needs to be the standard. We do all types of training. We get a new job and we learn systems on how to perform our jobs better, and we learn about HR rules and code of conducts, but we don't learn about mental health disorders and what they look like and how to take care of others or take care of ourselves. So I think training needs to be the standard across the board. Every single organization should have mental health training, and it shouldn't be training to stigmatize stuff. I know a lot of trainings can talk down on mental health disorders, like, oh, if someone's anxious, you might need to do this or coddle them this way. Or no, I mean, I'm a human, I'm grown. You don't have to talk to me like I'm three. Just understand that some days my mind is in control of my body instead of me being in control of my mind. It happens. So I just think training needs to be the standard, and there needs to be just safe spaces where people can say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, my anxiety is high, I'm feeling depressed, I need to just check out for a while, and be okay to do that without fearing losing their job.
Yes, because if the fear of losing your job is also going to trigger more stuff.
Oh
Like
my
it's
gosh,
just
it's like it never ends. It absolutely never ends.
it would make it 10 times worse. I always feel like there needs to be some of these big companies. One of my friends, he worked at Google,
Mhm.
and the amount of services they provide, oh my gosh, for their employees when it comes to like the food and the
Yeah.
childcare and like the mental health care on site and all these other things. And I'm just like, that's because they understand that happy employees, well taken care of employees,
Work
take care of
better.
the business. They work better. Like when I heard about all the amenities, I'm just like, this is your job.
Right.
Like this is like this is he was sick one day. They sent him medicine. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like what is life? Like I feel like that's so much better. How do you feel like with us being like, yeah, black people, women, how do you feel like that integrates with you dealing and managing your care? Like do you feel supported when you've explained this to other people? Do you feel like the stigma is worse in our community? Like how do you feel like you have so many different hats, as a mother, as like a woman, as a
Yeah.
as a black woman? Like how do you feel like you've been supported in that role if you talk to family or friends or anyone about it? Because I think that's something that adds to our stress, is because being a minority is a stressor anyway.
Absolutely. So, Black women as a whole are often forgotten. So, um, we're not supported. We're always supposed to be strong and have our stuff together and be able to take whatever comes our way and handle it with grace and class and not upset the masses with our attitude and our sass, which comes naturally because we're just sassy people, which is not a
Mhm.
bad thing. Um, but there is no support. It's like shocking. I've talked to a few people who like, because I'm extremely professional. I tell people all the time I'm very, very good at faking it. Like I can lock in whatever I'm going through and I can fake it until I make it. I have mastered that skill. So I've talked to a lot of people like, yeah, I deal with depression, or yeah, I have anxiety disorder. They're like, you deal with that? You don't look like you deal with that type of stuff at all. And I'm like, I'm human. I'm not going to be okay 100% of the time. That's just not logical. And I think if society stops expecting Black women to be 100% of the time, then they can start to open up the space for us to be vulnerable and have our breaks and say, this is overwhelming. I need to step back. I need a moment to just lose it. And then I'll come back and I'll be together. We just don't have that space to do that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have had experience with the stigma of like a mental health diagnosis, because when people say, oh, I couldn't expect that coming from you, it's like, well, what do you mean? You
Exactly.
mean like, do you mean that like you can't see me struggling? You feel like, does that mean that there's something wrong with mental health diagnoses and you thought that I was normal? Like, what do you mean when you say you wouldn't expect that from me? Like you
Yeah.
said it well, like I'm human. Like just those statements honestly make me feel the stigma of mental health. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know you robbed people on the weekends. What the heck are you like? What? Like, it's kind of just like, because that's the response, right? It's like, well, what do you? I don't understand. Is this a
Like,
bad
what do
thing
you
that I have a
expect?
mental health? What is
Yeah.
this a bad thing? I have a mental health diagnosis. What do you mean you wouldn't expect it from me?
And I think
And you
that's
know
just
what?
the issue with the stigmas in society. Mental health issues are seen as these like debilitating things. Like, oh, if you are depressed, you're gonna be stuck in bed, you don't shower, you don't eat, you don't do this. It's like the most extreme of mental health illnesses is what we're supposed to look like. But then we forget about this whole section of society who are functioning with their mental health disorders, and we're just completely ignoring them because it's like, oh, you don't look like you have a mental health disorder. So we're not really going to pay attention to what you're saying because it's not anything physical. It's not like a skin boil, or it's not like a broken bone where I have a limp. You can't see it because it's in my mind. So just because you can't see it, you don't believe it's not there.
Yes, and that's why so many people don't understand when individuals are struggling with things. They don't understand what they're saying that can be triggering. That's why you really need to be mindful of like what you say and what you do around different people. Like I'm, you never really understand what someone is going through. Even when I would say being in psychology, but I think this just might be just growing up to be an adult. It's very hard to be upset with people
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just like, oh, well, maybe they had a rough day, week, year, month. Maybe they're just going through something. Even if they're jerks to me, I'm like,
Right.
yeah, that server was awful. I'm gonna tip them 30% because I think they're having a rough day. And it's just like, what? Well, what? It's like
Exactly.
you never
You
know.
never know.
And I just think the fact that you can actually like be very professional, and the way you mentioned it, like the fact that you can kind of fake it, as you said, that's detrimental.
It
Like
is
that.
so bad. Like it is one of like the things I'm very good at, but the things that I'm most aware that I probably shouldn't do because it closes me off to all types of support that might be out there. But since I fake it and have it together 100% of the time, quote unquote, um, no one's willing to look out and say, hey, are you okay? Are you dealing with something? Do you need some additional support? Because I put on the face like I have it together 100% of the time. So it is not a good thing. I'm going to just put that out there. It's not a good thing. I'm just very good at it.
Yeah, and it's not the worst thing in the world to be able to like bring yourself together and stuff like that. I think we need to do better at checking in on our people who we think are doing well 100% of the time
Yeah.
too. Like check in on your strong friends and family members
Yeah.
too. Like, you think that they're just everyone's support, But it's like no one needs to be that all the time. Like
Mhm.
the Black Superwoman syndrome is real.
It
Gotta do
is.
like I gotta do like 20 episode session just on that. But it's so hard because you don't check on the person who you think is okay. You're constantly going to them and telling them things, and they may be struggling and they want to support you. So they may not take the time to be like, you know what, actually today's a pretty rough day for me. I really can't do this. Because they want to be supportive. Like you don't want to be shutting someone down. So I do think that is it's great, but it can also be so hard because it's the reason why people will be like, I didn't know you suffered from that. And it's like, what? I'm in America. We are in this
Exactly.
president's America.
Oh,
I am a woman. Gee, I mean, that's difficult. I am a parent. I am not like I have to struggle with, I have to manage everything. I have to
yes,
balance everything. Like
yes.
I'm a human. Like we're
We're
just
all
human.
humans.
I do. Okay. So one of the things I always want to ask, because like, I mean, how do you feel like your therapy experience has been? Have you had to switch therapists? Have you had an amazing one versus like a not so amazing one? How do you feel like it's been?
So like my childhood therapist, they completely suck. But I did a lot of research when I was trying to find a therapist out here in San Diego. I wanted to go to a woman first, and I wanted to go to a Black woman specifically because I'm a Black woman and I wanted to sit in front of someone who's going to understand me like me because they go through the exact same things. They understand my vernacular. It's the same. I'm talking to a mirror. So I was very, very fortunate when I moved out here to find a therapist who I actually like and I actually connect with. I've only been to a few sessions so far, but I'm absolutely comfortable. And that is not the norm. I know a lot of people go through therapists and trying to find the right fit. So I was very, very blessed to find someone who fits with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've actually had to switch therapists a couple of times because they just didn't vibe with me. And it wasn't like they were like malicious or mean or like not well educated. It just didn't really vibe with the way I deal with my stuff. Like I didn't feel like it was benefiting me. How did you find your therapist?
Can you hear me? There's this
Yeah.
group. I'm as soon as I moved out here, there's this Facebook group called Black San Diego where they try and link everyone with Black owned businesses. So I just put a message out there and said, hey, I'm looking for a Black therapist who's a woman, point me to the right direction. So I got all these recommendations, and it took me weeks to actually reach out to this therapist because I had to do my research. I had to make sure that it was legit, and I tried to find pictures so I can see what she looked like beforehand because again, my anxiety was going crazy. So I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work. Took me weeks before I had the information and just sat on it for at least 4 weeks before I actually made an appointment. And then even making the first appointment, that was so crazy. Like I had so much anxiety behind that. And going to the first appointment, I almost canceled. Like I was driving to the appointment and I literally almost canceled because I was just so nervous about it. I just didn't know if it would be a good fit. But thank goodness I was able to push through and went to the appointment because it was amazing.
Yes. First of all, this group Black San Diego sounds amazing. Is
It
that
is
like a
amazing.
Facebook or Instagram? What
It's
is
a
that?
Facebook group. So if you live in San Diego and you are Black, you can join the Facebook group. And it's just all type of resources. It's Black businesses, answers to anything, questions or anything. You can promote your own businesses. There's events that are going around the city. They also just started an app, and I'm gonna contact them and say, look, I was pubbing y'all on the podcast. Y'all need to give me a little something, something. But
Yeah.
but
This
no,
is
it's
business marketing.
really a great resource. Like I would pub them for free because this really has been a great resource because I moved out here by myself. I didn't know anyone. I don't know anyone in the city. So it was a great resource to find stuff that I was comfortable with.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And also, you mentioned, I think a lot of individuals have fears when it comes to going to therapy. I myself, when I'm dealing with anxiety, I combat my anxiety by over prep. Like, I would have been looking up pictures too. I would have been
Mm-hmm.
looking up to see. Like, it's just it's the only thing that helps me manage it. Like, if I have if a presentation, I do it like 6 times to prep myself. So then by the time I do it in front of people, it's like, oh, we already know what part we're at.
Right.
But you also mentioned like typical fears. A lot of individuals don't know what to expect from therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So they decide not to go
Yeah, and
and
then
they
also
decide to stay
your
home.
mind can wander. Like I came up, This is what my disorder does, is really good with coming up with worst case scenarios. And it's not just like, oh, what if this happened? And then what if this happened? I will literally sit there for hours and visualize the entire worst case scenario from start to finish. And that would give me anxiety. I'm like, oh crap, what if that really happens? So I had that situation. I'm like, what if I go in here and she's just completely horrible and it's just like a horrible experience?
Yeah.
So it's scary, but I think it's necessary to take that leap and just push past it.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things about you sharing your experience is just talking about it is very typical to be nervous when you start therapy or anxious or fearful when you're starting therapy. That's okay. But I always tell like my patients, like, courage is not doing stuff when you're not afraid. It's doing stuff when you scared out of your mind.
Yeah.
Like no one, like when I'm talking to them into combating their anxiety and working with their fears, I'm like, no one said that you had to do this and be totally okay with doing this. No one said that you had to take this action or talk to this person and feel fine while you're doing it. The goal is so that we keep exposing ourselves so you become more comfortable. But if you are anxious talking to people, or you're anxious about building up to this whole goal, we're still going to try it. We're just going to be uncomfortable while we do it, and we're just hoping that it becomes more comfortable. But I'm like, oh no, this is not going to be fun in the beginning. No. No,
Yeah,
we're just trying to get you to
a learning experience, and you definitely have to get into the groove of things. So go to therapy, people. It's necessary.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. So, okay. So, a couple of things. One, I want you to tell everyone where they can find you
Okay.
and all your amazingness. Like,
So
plug everything.
I'm gonna try and remember everything. So I am mainly right now on Instagram, and that's at Saidah Murphy, SaidahMurphy. I also host a podcast called Black Girls Need Love Too, a healing podcast, because I wanted to create that space for us to break down and be vulnerable, because we don't have it a lot of places. So I wanted to create that space. So you can follow that on Instagram at a healing podcast. And then also, if you want to connect with my business, if you have a film or podcast you want produced, my production company works with women of color. So if you are a woman of color and you want to produce something and make some magic, you can visit the website at smmediaent.com and connect with me on there, and we can make some magic happen.
Yes, and just everyone, so everything will be plugged in the show notes too. So every single thing that Saidah mentioned is going to be in the show notes, so you can just click it. Just FYI. Before we end, I always ask this like uber like existential textbook like psych question that is just like so over the top, but I do love it. So what would you say is like so far in your life, because it's a journey, but like your mantra, your philosophy, your affirmation that you feel like keeps you going?
I have two. So my favorite book is The Alchemist. And there's a quote in that book that says, whenever you want something, and this is paraphrasing, whenever you want something, the entire universe conspires to help you achieve it. And that just is a daily reminder that whatever I want in my life is already in the works, and the entire universe has my back to push it forward. So that's just my constant reminder. And then the second one is this quote by Winston Churchill that says, never give up on something you can't go a day without thinking about. And I just use that all the time because I have ideas and projects that I want to push through. And it's easy to get discouraged when you get into a depressive episode or your anxiety takes over and you don't accomplish as much as you want. But it's still a goal and a passion because you can't stop thinking about it day to day. So never give up on it. Keep on pushing towards it. Take baby steps and just do it.
Yes. Oh, those are good ones. I have never read The Alchemist.
Oh my
I've never read The Alchemist, so I
God.
actually think I need to do that. You know what? Actually, let me add another question.
Okay.
Because like I'm always looking to add things to like my library.
Mhm.
So would you say The Alchemist is a book that you're like, this is a book you have to read in
Yes,
life?
absolutely. I read it for the first time in high school and it changed my life. And then I read it a few years later when I got in college and it changed my life. And then I read it maybe like 2 years ago and it changed my life again. It's just a book that you can always get something new out of, no matter which stage you are in your life. It is an amazing book. I would say that is the book you have to read.
Okay, and this is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna spell it out right. I'm gonna put it in the show notes too, guys. So we're gonna start asking about books too because I love reading. Or you can also make it on an audiobook. They're not paying me, but they are helpful. So thank you so much, Saidah, for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. I just love talking to people about their experiences because everyone's experience is different. You also all shared such good information about how mental health manifests differently. One person's anxiety is not going to be the same as someone else's anxiety. I also feel like the invalidating statements part, everyone should just be mindful, okay? Because they're not helpful. You know, like I know you're trying to help, but you're not. So
yes. Just ask how you can help people. They're more than willing to tell you how to do it. I've talked to plenty of people who have mental disorders, and they are more than willing to talk about it. It's not so just ask the questions.
That's what we do. So instead of making these statements, guys, instead of making these suggestions, let's make more queries than suggestions and statements. Just ask. That's the best thing to do. Well, thank you so much, Saidah. This was amazing. I'm gonna put in there, of course. Oh my God, this was amazing. I think I had more fun than you. I'm gonna put in the show notes where everyone can find you, and your amazing podcast and your amazing company and all those things. And I hope you guys enjoyed the show. You can find us anywhere you enjoy listening to a podcast, and we're on YV Radio every single Friday at 10 a.m. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.